I'm Lauri Fleckett of Soltar Solutions, and today I'm here on Focus Forward live with Lauri, with Penny Isaac Nelson, and we are going to talk about, are you ready for this? The 3 excruciatingly painful reasons projects fail. So, Penny, tell us a little bit about what you do, and then I'd like to find out what those 3 excruciating reasons are.
Well, hi, Lauri. It's good to see you again. A little bit about what I do is Superior Results provides project management services and business support to small businesses and nonprofits. So we're here to just help nonprofits and businesses succeed and go after their mission.
All right. So now I have to ask this question because I've always wondered about it. What exactly is a nonprofit?
Well, there are many different kinds of nonprofits. Some of them have more of a kind of a humanitarian mission. For example, feeding starving kids, perhaps either in the States or another country. Some of them are like the Red Cross, which I know we're all familiar with, Salvation Army. So they're basically organizations that do their work from primarily, not completely, but primarily donations. And it's important to them to give back to their community. And they have typically a menu of donors that provide that income, and that could be individuals, it could be companies, but they exist not to make profit. So they're the opposite of a small business. They're there to serve the community and do good versus make money.
Okay, and you know, for me, it's a little bit difficult to think about that because I think that business, any business, every business has to have revenue streams to be able to survive.
Right, right. I know what you're saying. A nonprofit, though, the difference would be that a nonprofit doesn't produce a product that can just be sold, and you can sell more of those to make more money, like a business would be selling a service or an item. So that's the big difference between the two.
So do some nonprofits have a for-profit arm that may support those nonprofits, maybe like a school or a church that would have, you know, like a cafe in it or a gift shop or something like that? Are those like straddling nonprofit and profit world, or is that all considered nonprofit?
You know, there are a lot of ways a business can tackle that. So they can be their business, but on the other hand, they can also have what might be called a foundation, where they can give back to the community either within the United States or outside of the country. So that would be one option. And then there are people that run a small business so that they've got the income to do kind of that social ministry or social, just being involved in their community to see something improve, kind of those social causes.
Okay, so I think that we understand the concept of project management, but what's the difference in project management in the for-profit and the nonprofit world?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of elements that are the same. You still have something that has a start and a finish, the project. There are deadlines to meet in between, getting from the beginning to the end. There's a budget you have to stay within. There's a quality product at the end. There's a finish, and there's an agreed upon outcome of what that will look like. And so there are many ways that project management is the same, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit organization. Some of the differences are in the team that could be working with a project manager. For example, I've done some projects where my team that I'm working with are not staff. They are primarily volunteers with that organization, or even board members who, for the most part, are also volunteer. So kind of the makeup of a team can be very different between the two sides, profit and nonprofit.
Okay, the next question is really about, I know that there's different terminology in the profit world and the nonprofit world. I'm familiar with the profit world, but give us a little bit of a difference in maybe how things are phrased. So if I walked into a nonprofit and I was going to do a project, like what are the kind of things that that I would be able to say that might not work in the profit world?
Yeah. Well, leadership, for example, in a nonprofit world is usually referred to as an executive director, not a CEO or a CIO or a CFO or all the C's. So executive director, and usually there's a volunteer board that has heavy influence on the organization. And then depending on the size, it could be an army of volunteers who are just really excited about what that organization is about and the social cause that they're going after. And so talking about volunteers is good language. Talking about boards is good, and executive director when you think leadership of the organization.
Well, when I did work briefly in a nonprofit, and it was very, very, very different experience because they, I'm so used to the, we're in business to make money, that there were some terms that I used that people were just like shocked by.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the terms or the way that I came out with them, but let me tell you, there was some shocked people.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of an idea about what the benefits to a nonprofit would be to use a project manager.
Well, one of the things that I think for a nonprofit is they're not necessarily familiar with that term, project management, because that is very much in the business world. So even that term or the thought of a person that does that is probably a fairly new concept for nonprofits. But I think nonprofits, they're running projects all the time. They're doing fundraisers, they're doing an event, they're bringing on a new program that they've got to learn how to do. It could be a database, could be a variety of things. Really, it's anything that's not part of the normal day-to-day operations of the organization. Anything outside of that can be considered a project.
So give us an example. Give us an example of, like, why would a nonprofit that's always doing projects, why would they hire somebody like you?
Well, primarily because they're probably running at not enough staff. That's fairly typical for a nonprofit. They're trying to be really fiscally responsible, and so their staff are probably already overloaded, and they probably are not maybe being as efficient as they could be in accomplishing the things that help them reach their mission. And that's, I think, a lot due to because they don't have enough staff to do it. So they may have to make the choice. Either I pull my staff off their regular day-to-day to get a certain thing done and then let other things slide, or things just aren't going to get done. I don't know how I can do it. You can only work so many hours in a week, in a month. And so I think a lot of nonprofits really struggle with that.
So I'm hearing kind of two different things. I'm hearing one, that they don't have enough necessarily, hands on deck or, manpower, if you will. But then I'm also hearing that there are other resources that are quite limited.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep, I would say so. And so a project manager can really it can increase efficiency for them. They can knock out a project or something that's really going to help further their cause in a short amount of time. They can bring somebody in who only focuses on that, and maybe they're there for 2 or 3 weeks and they're done and they're gone, or they're there for 2 or 3 months, depending on the project. And so the win is the nonprofit gets their work done, their project completed, and they don't have to make any kind of a long-term employment commitment. Because I think the first thing I think a nonprofit thinks is, I have to hire somebody and I can't afford to do that. So now, how are we going to get everything done?
The other thing is there's quite a lot of challenges working with volunteers. Yep. Because the whole nature of volunteering is that, people aren't always available when you need them and things like that. So working with volunteers could be quite stressful in itself.
Right.
So give us an idea about maybe a specific project that you worked on in the nonprofit world, and how they went about maybe structuring the project to even come up with the concept that they needed a project manager.
I think a lot of nonprofits first think about a fundraising effort that they might need to do, because that's, raising funds, that's the lifeblood of a nonprofit for the most part. And so an easy example to give you would be a fundraising effort and kind of an event sort of situation. So the biggest event that I've done for a nonprofit had a budget of about $1.5 million, and that included your
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
You don't think about nonprofits with budgets like that. You know what I mean? You think about, tiny little budgets and, because I don't know. I don't live in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big budget.
Yeah, so that's the biggest budget, but I think that's maybe an exception to what's the typical for sure. But many organizations need to plan that event. They have all got fundraising needs, and you have to be really creative to do that well. And so the executive directors are always a part of that. The boards are always a part of that, but they may not have a staff member who's really gifted at all the details, all the planning. How do you help everybody stay on the same page, et cetera? That just takes a special set of skills to do that really well.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So when we look at a project where they would bring you in to say fundraise, how would you go about doing that? I mean, I just, it's hard for me to imagine, going to people and asking for money or creating events that ask for money. I can understand asking for the business. I can understand asking for the sale, but it's really hard for me to imagine approaching people for money. I mean, how do you do that? How do you make that happen?
Well, it is delicate. But if you think about things you've given money to, or I think about things I've given money to, I mean, you work hard for your money, and so when you give it, you want to make sure it's going to a good cause, something that you believe in, but you also have to be in a position where you trust that organization that they're going to do what they say with your resources. So when I think about money that my husband and I have given, I'm more excited to give to something that helps further a mission. It's going to help people in some way. I'm not so excited about a building, like we need to build something. We have to build a building, a new facility for our organization. Well, you might need to do that for sure. I'm not saying that you might not. But when you cast that vision to me about how I can give and why I should give, tell me about the impact that that's going to have on the people. Who's going to get served through that program, and when you get that building up, what's going to happen inside it that makes me excited to be a part of it, because a bunch of bricks and a roof is really not that exciting. So it's how you talk about it is a real key for fundraising.
Well, it sounds like it can be emotional. These can be emotional conversations that are really pulling on people's heartstrings.
For sure, yep. And there's stories out there. Every organization has stories. They're making an impact in lives and individuals and families and their communities, and so they need to share the stories. That's really the key to funding and to having donors be excited about being a part of it.
Yeah, I've been to some events where they march somebody on stage and I'm like, where's my checkbook? Let me write this check right now. Yeah. You're so motivated by the story, and the story's amazing. So yeah, it's always interesting.
Another thing a project manager could do in that situation is, when you're working on a project, you have goals, you have outcomes, you have evaluation, whether it's worked or not. And all of that information are things that could be shared at an event like that. And when people hear about your success and you can back it up with numbers and data, you're not just saying, well, I think we're doing a great job. I think we've fed 3,000 kids. Well, did you or didn't you? Do you know? And the more you have, just like a business, the more data you have to back that up. And I think, and project managers that's right in their wheelhouse, is to have that data, know if what you're doing is working, and then just making adjustments as needed.
Awesome. I've been to events where I could tell you it was like a project management failure. They don't ask for donations. They have all these people there. You wait. They don't ask for donations. I've been to events where I say, wow, what a miss. Just a quick question. Is it my perception, or the perception maybe of business people out there, that not-for-profits aren't really as focused on making things happen as they are about maybe feeling good?
Mm-hmm.
Have you know, what's the story on that?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the leadership for sure. I think your average kind of smaller nonprofit, they may not have the skill, the business kind of skill that a for-profit business might have. For example, the operational background, just keeping track of, you know, all the financial pieces to it. Hopefully they hire a really great financial person, because it's really important to know what you do well at and where your weaknesses are, and make sure you find somebody who can fill those gaps in. But I don't think that, I think you're right. Businesses seem to have a reputation that they're really savvy about all of that, where nonprofits have a reputation they maybe are not so much. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's true, but I think there's a reputation like that.
Okay, so that could be the perception.
Yep.
All right, now we're going to get into the juicy part of the show. Tell us those excruciatingly painful failure points.
Well, they are excruciating. When you see it happen, or when you're a part of a failure, it's never a fun thing. And so I think number one is communication. When you fail as the project manager, if you fail to communicate both with your team and with the executive leadership above you, that's a complete recipe for failure right there. You can head down a road and you could be completely off base if you're not in alignment with what the leadership is looking to achieve and what they're asking you to do. So that's critical. And then I think it even gets more critical when your team is volunteers who are there because they're passionate about a cause. They're there of their own choice. It's not their job to be there. And so you have to be able to navigate all of that and respect all the opinions, but yet be able to lead people through it and communicate really well. So bad communication, definitely the number one.
Okay, so what's the number two?
Number two. Number two is as you're looking at a project and you're trying to anticipate things that could take it off track, when you fail to see the possible roadblocks that could pop up, a change in direction that you may not have expected, we call that risk management. And so if you don't do that, and then you get derailed by things that are unexpected, that you didn't think about ahead of time, that can completely take a project in a whole different direction and not bring it in on time, not bring it in budget, and the quality is certainly not what it was supposed to be. So that's the triple threat, right?
Hey, that sounds like some of the films I worked on.
Over
budget, late, and the quality suffers.
Yep.
Oh, I've been there.
Absolutely.
And then what's the third one?
Here's the one that I've seen happen a lot, and I think it just makes it really hard for everybody involved. Many times the team that you're working with, or me as a project manager, I'm working with volunteers, and that's okay. But when I'm working with staff, I think that their leaders don't take into account that they're already working full-time, and now to add them to a project team means that if you really want a great result and you want, employees that are doing their best work, then you can't expect them to work their full-time plus add a project with its own deadlines and expectations. That's really a recipe for things not to work well and for the project to not be successful.
Okay, Penny, now I've seen the crossover between the profit and nonprofit world. Because almost everyone in their company is doing like a job and a half to two jobs. So sure. Yeah, so I get it. So how can we, as well, not as a business owner, but say somebody who's in charge of a nonprofit, how can we circumvent these issues? Is it the project manager that we choose? Is it the way we structure the project? Is it the resources that they have available? What's the fix, the big fix for these challenges and these failures?
Yeah, I would say my challenge, if I could give a challenge to nonprofit leaders, is to just expand your thinking and think about what would it be like to have somebody on board who's here just to help me get this thing done, this project. And we can be focused. It's their responsibility. They tell me and they keep me up on what's going on with it. And then we only work with the funds we have. So, I mean, you work with what you've got. So if you only have X amount, then that's what we can do. A lot of nonprofits are writing grants as well. And so they're doing some project things in those grants. They're giving deadlines. They're given a budget. You're evaluating the success of that grant and what you said you were going to do in it. So all of those really are project things. They just might not think of it that way.
So here's the bonus question. This is like the $100,000 question. I know you've been in project management for a long time, and I know that you've been primarily in the nonprofit world. What do you wish that the leaders of nonprofits would know that would change your life and other project managers' life?
I wish that leaders of nonprofits, I think it's what I was just mentioning, is like expand your definition of how we can get our work done, and maybe going outside the box and bringing somebody in from the outside who can come alongside you and your team to accomplish the things that you really want to get done. And maybe they're mission critical. And so you really do need to get these projects through and done. The other part I would say is that don't be afraid to try something different. It is a little different for a nonprofit to do this, but my passion is to see your nonprofit reach its mission, go after why you're there and why do you exist. And so to me, unfinished things like these projects are getting in the way of you accomplishing your mission. So I just love coming in and I think of it kind of as a load lifter. So let me come in and kind of herd everybody and make sure we're doing what we need to do, and then great, we'll part company when the project's done and you'll be on your way.
So you're saying that they should expand their thinking. So what I'd like you to do is give us 3 ideas that you might have on how they could expand their thinking. What 3 tips could you give them that they could use to expand their thinking?
Well, tip number 1, I would say, is to think about the projects and the things that are unfinished, the things that maybe there's things that keep them up at night. What do you think about when you go to bed and you get up and it just rolls around in your head and it's the same thing it was from last month? It's just not getting done. So what are those things? That would be the first tip. Identify them. The second tip would be just to think about who on your staff could you offload that to? And if the answer is nobody, everybody's already at capacity, well, then you might have an opportunity there to bring in somebody from the outside. The other thing is there are nonprofits who are doing this, and so my tip would be find another one that is and let them share their feedback. How's it going? Was it worth it? What was the benefit? Would they do it again? Those are just smart things to do before you spend your money.
Well, that's great advice. I'm really kind of surprised where you went with that. I was kind of expecting something a little bit different, but I think that those were great answers.
Great.
Awesome. Well, I learned a lot about the nonprofit world and how cool that is. So thank you so much for coming on. And I hope this is the first time the phone has been working in over a week. I just haven't gotten around to calling the phone company. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Anyway, so thanks so much for being on. It was great. And I learned so much, as I always do.
Great. Thank you, Lauri.
All right. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.